Okay, now I want to cover the root file system, which is why I've gone back down to the root. This is quite important to understand, really. Now if I just quickly list this. Okay. Now, you'll notice there's always a certain set of directories here. I'm going to go through them in alphabetical order. So, I should mention TAC S for list is put them in alphabetical order, or sort of them. In fact, if I just put TAC LS, TAC long and sort it, might be a bit easier to read. Okay. The bin folder is for common programs that are shared by all. Both the owners, which is the system, the admin, the system and any user. This is where the most common programs go in your bin directory. The boot directory contains references to system devices and some files with special permissions, but that's a different matter. Mainly it contains references to system devices. Okay. Now your dev directory, it's where the important it's where basically where your devices go. Sorry, what I just mentioned, actually I've skipped one here. The boot system is for your boot files. Getting ahead of myself. The boot directory, is for your boot files. Your bootloader, such as grub, your kernels, VM Linux, stuff like that. It's where those files go. Really shouldn't really be tampering with that. Your dev file is what contains references to system devices, and also some other files with special properties which you don't really need to worry about. So just to reiterate, as I was getting ahead of myself, bin is for common programs associated with all users, including the system. Boot is for boot files, such as your grub loader and stuff. Dev is any references to system devices. Okay. Now, your etc file, etc. This is where the important system configuration files go. Your home directory is where the user's home folders will go. So if I have user 1, user 2, user 3, there'll be 3 directories in there, user 1, user 2, user 3. And when they start, they'll each start in their own folder. User 1, user 2, user 3. If you log in as root, you'll actually log in the root directory, which is your home folder. Okay? That's the home directory. These are files, we don't need to worry about them at the moment. Okay. The lib directory is where library files go. This includes files for all kinds of programs that are used by both the system and the users, really. It's where all the library files go. If you've got a lib64, it means you're on a 64-bit system, and it's where 64-bit specific libraries go. As I said, this does include files for all kinds of programs that are needed by the system and by the users, either 64-bit or 32-bit. You may only have lib, and that means you run a 32-bit system. Lost and found is where files go. Say you've had an error and your system restarted itself. It'll put them any files that it don't know what they are. Say it was using a file and it scrambled it or something. It'll put it in a lost and found folder, should I say. Basically any files that were saved or recovered during any system failure, you go here. Okay. The media folder is where any media used by the system or any binary files and such go. It also has a lot of other uses, but that's its main use. The mount folder, or MNT, this is the standard mount point for the external file systems such as any external hard drive, your CD drive, etc, etc, or including remote file systems. This is their actual mount point. So if you look in there, you'll see a directory that refers to each of those. Okay. Your opt directory, OPT, this typically contains any extra or third-party software, which is different to standard software, but could still be commands. Okay, extra or third-party software really. Your proc directory, well, that's where the virtual file systems, and also it contains information about the system. It's basically it contains information about your system. It's actually a virtual file system within itself. I wouldn't really worry about that. Sometimes, sorry, I'm on proc, aren't I? Yeah. Sometimes this can be used to store essential system files, such as, let me think of an example, such as the one when I showed you how to do port forwarding. It contains that system in net, IPv4, IP/IP forward. It's where your processes run. It's like, it's pretty essential. I wouldn't really mess with that like a virtual file system. Okay. We've already covered root. It's the home directory for the root user. The run directory is pretty self-explanatory. I wouldn't mess with this either. It's pretty standard. It contains all the run type files. The sbin contains programs that are for use by both the system and the admin. So they're not generally, although users can use some of these programs, they're mainly system or admin programs. Most of your programs will be in bin, or obviously your first party ones in opt. The ones in here are mainly used by the system or the admin, the root. Okay. These contain system files, both of these, and you shouldn't mess with these at all. Basically the system will handle these when it needs them, and it's really something you shouldn't really be bothering about accessing or using, so let's not worry about them. I don't want to get you messing in there. TMP is your temporary directory. It's where any temporary files that are made by system processes or programs, it's where these are put, as and when are needed basically. Say you're running a program and it needs to create, it's creating a capture file for example, it'll start building it in the temp directory, and when it's complete it'll transfer it to whatever directory the program's running in or is outputted from the program, but it'll be built in the temporary directory. So it basically puts files here as and when different processes need them. Again, it's nothing you should really be worried about. Okay. USR, or the user directory, this contains programs, libraries and documentation for all user related programs. The main thing you'll use this for is for documentation on different programs. All manual pages you view, they're usually in here. Okay. Now the last one you want to be worried about is var. Now this is the folder that stores all variable files, and it also stores any temporary files created by users, such as log files, your mail queue, your print spooler, web servers, databases, etc. That's quite a useful folder to know. When you start Apache, for example, your HTML files will be in here, and any log files from any programs that you start will be here. Okay, that's the basic folder structure. I know I ran through it quick. If you want more details, it's pretty straightforward to look up on Google, but that's the quick overview of what they do. It's quite important to know it. You have to excuse the creaking, it's an old house. Okay, now I'm quickly going to cover some of the important files. Let me clear my screen that pen testers and or ethical hackers should be aware of, especially when in their own system and any remote systems they may access. The first one which you should be aware of, and you can run any of these with cat or any text editor if it's a file, is your passwd. passwd. That contains a list of all the users on the system and their permissions, what group they belong to, etc. and default to know, etc. password, passwd. Okay, and you can view it with cat or any other editor such as gedit. Okay, another one you should be aware of is again in the etc folder, which if you remember, it contains important system configuration files. So mainly most of the ones I'm going to go through now will be in this folder. These are very useful when you're accessing a remote system and you want to know details. Another one is etc shadow. This will actually contain hashes of any passwords of the users. A hash is basically the password in an encrypted form. You will take the hash and use a password cracker to turn it to plain text. A very important file to know about. Okay. Another important one is group, etc group. This contains a list of all local account groups and their permissions and such. So combined with passwd and shadow, you'll know everything there is to know about the user, what permissions they got, what group they belong to, what permissions that group has, where it stands in the hierarchy of groups, etc. Okay, now another one in the etc folder that's important really is the init.d folder. This isn't a file, so I don't know why cat's still there. It's actually a folder. Basically this folder contains service initialization scripts, and say you want a script to run on startup, this would actually be in this folder. So when you want to see what a system is running on startup and such, what things it's starting, this is the folder you'll be looking in. Okay. If you want to know what the system host name is, you simply look in that file with cat or gedit or what have you. It'll tell you what the host name is. While I'm actually on that subject, if you type resolve without the e.conf, this will actually tell you what the system DNS servers are. I know there's easier ways to view this on your own system, but on a remote system it may not be as easy. So if you simply look at that in cat or in more or another text editor, it'll tell you what the DNS servers are for DNS spoofing and such really. If you want to know what their system environmental variables are, you simply go to etc profile and your cat or more or gedit, whatever, look at that file in any text editor and you can see what a system's environmental variables are. If you don't know what those are, don't worry about it, but you will in time. Okay, the last one that I'm going to look at in the etc folder, in fact I can think of two more, so another one, I thought of it, is fstab. etc fstab. If you look at this file in cat etc, it'll tell you what the file system mounts are for that system. So if you're on a remote system, it'll tell you where the mounts are in that system, what file systems they're using, etc. Quite useful sometimes, especially on web servers. Okay, now a useful directory in the etc one to know about is network /interfaces. If you open that folder in a text editor, that file should I say, in a text editor or cat or more or something, it'll list all the network interfaces that system uses. So it's quite useful to know about, especially when you're pivoting from one system in a network to another system. Okay, I'm about done with the etc directory. Okay. Now, when you're in any home folder, whether it's a root directory or a user's home folder, if you want to know their SSH keys, you simply go into a hidden directory SSH, and all our SSH keys will be in there. Okay. That can be useful, depending on what you're trying to do really. If you're SSH cracking, obviously it's useful. If you want to know their bash history, and their terminal's been closed so you can't simply type history, then you can simply go to their home directory and open this hidden file in some type of text editor or cat or more. This will show you their command history. Okay. In fact, if I remember right there, it's actually bash/history. Just check that. Okay, different on Calais, hang on. But I think it would be, to be honest. Oh, of course, I'm not in my home directory, that's why. I think I'm going dyslexic. Okay. There you go, I thought it was. That'll show you my command history. That's for any terminals that have been closed. Okay. Not the currently open terminal. It won't be saved to the .bash/history file until the terminal itself is closed. So it's looking at past history. Especially useful on remote systems, but I suppose it could be useful on local networks in a school or college or something, if you want to know what a previous user's been doing, a different user to yourself of course, and you've got access to their home directory. Okay, another useful file, especially for remote access, is the var log directory. Another folder, should say, not file. This is where all the Linux system log files are kept. Sometimes it's a var log, like in Calais. On some Linux flavours, it's actually called ADM, other than log, var ADM. You'll find all the log files there. It's usually var log though. Okay, that contains all the log files for different programs that have been saved. For example, var log Apache 2 access this log. This is a typical path of the Apache server logs. If I was running an Apache server, that's the typical default path. Sometimes instead of Apache 2 it can be HTTPD. So when you're remotely hacking a web server, it's usually this type of path, or Apache 2 for the server logs. Okay, so you can see var log is pretty useful for log files. Okay, that's about all I can think of for the very useful files that you'll need when you're remotely accessing another computer.